You learned to swallow your tears before you learned to tie your shoes? Figured out that crying made things worse before you understood why things were bad in the first place. And somewhere in that early education in emotional suppression, in that crash course on being strong when you should have been allowed to be small, you stopped being a child and became a tiny adult carrying weight that wasn't yours, solving problems that weren't your responsibility, managing emotions that belonged to the grown-ups who were supposed to be managing yours. And nobody called it what it was. Nobody said, this child is being forced to grow up too fast. They said, look how mature they are, how responsible, how wise beyond their years. And you learned to wear that label like a badge when really it was a scar. Proof that you'd been robbed of something fundamental. Something you can't name but can feel the absence of every single day when you're struggling to relax, struggling to play, struggling to feel anything without immediately wondering if feeling it is safe, if showing it is allowed. If this emotion you're experiencing is going to be used against you or become a burden someone else has to carry because the adults in your life taught you through their actions or their absence or their own inability to handle their shit that your feelings were problems, that your needs were inconvenient, that crying was weak and feeling was dangerous, and the only acceptable version of you was the one who had it together, who didn't complain, who could be counted on to be strong when everyone else was falling apart. You don't cry anymore, or if you do, it's in private, in secret. In small controlled doses that you shut down as quickly as possible because letting it fully out feels dangerous, feels like opening a door you might not be able to close, feels like losing control in a way you've never been allowed to lose control. Because control was survival, composure was safety, and falling apart was a luxury reserved for people who had someone to catch them, which you didn't, you've never had. You feel emotions but you don't trust them, don't know what to do with them, don't know how to let them exist without immediately trying to solve them or suppress them, or explain them away because you were taught that feelings aren't meant to be felt. They're meant to be managed, fixed, gotten over as quickly as possible so you can get back to functioning, back to being the strong one, back to being the person everyone leans on, because leaning on someone else needing support, showing vulnerability, those options were never available to you. You can't remember the last time you let yourself be completely honest about how hard things are. Can't remember when you stopped expecting comfort and started expecting judgment. Can't remember the moment you decided that needing help was shameful and struggling was failure and the only acceptable way to exist was independently, capably, without burdening anyone with the reality of your inner experience. You help everyone show up for everyone, hold space for everyone else. Is emotions while yours stay locked in a vault. You lost the combination 2 years ago. And people call you strong, call you reliable, call you the rock, the stable one, the person who's always okay. And you've learned to accept these compliments like they're good things, when really they're descriptions of your prison. Confirmation that you're still performing the role you were assigned in childhood. The one who doesn't need, doesn't feel, doesn't break, doesn't ask for anything, because asking was never safe, needing was never okay, and feeling was always too dangerous to risk. You overfunction in relationships because underperforming feels like death. You solve other people's problems because solving your own requires vulnerability you can't access. You stay busy because stillness lets the feelings catch up. You maintain control because losing it feels like the world will end. You're hyper-responsible because irresponsibility was never an option. You're hyper-independent because depending on others always led to disappointment. And you're so tired, bone-deep tired, soul tired. Tired from decades of holding it together, of being strong, of never getting to be the one who needs help, who breaks down, who gets to be weak and messy and human without it being a catastrophe, without it confirming that you're failing at the one thing you're supposed to be good at, which is being okay no matter what, being functional regardless of circumstances, being strong because everyone else gets to be weak and someone has to keep things from completely falling apart. Here's what happened to you, why you are the way you are. And it's not your fault even though you've been carrying guilt about it for years. You had parents or caregivers who were physically present but emotionally unavailable or emotionally volatile, or dealing with their own trauma in ways that made them unable to hold space for yours. And you, being a child with a child's need to survive, adapted, learned quickly what behaviors kept you safe, what emotions were acceptable, what version of yourself made life easier for everyone. And that version was the strong one, the mature one, the one who didn't cry or complain or need too much. And so you became that. Not because you wanted to, but because you had to. Because the alternative was rejection or punishment or simply being ignored during the moments you needed someone most. And a child who's ignored when they're hurting learns very quickly to stop showing hurt, to stop feeling it if possible, to develop emotional numbness as a defense mechanism against pain that nobody was going to soothe anyway. And here's the brutal truth that explains everything, that makes sense of why you struggle so much with basic human things like crying when you're sad or asking for help when you need it, or letting people see you when you're not okay. You learned that feelings were dangerous because expressing them led to negative outcomes to parents who got angry or withdrew, or made it about them, or told you to stop being dramatic, to situations where your emotions became problems other people had to solve, and you could feel their resentment, their exhaustion, their wish that you would just be easier, just be less. Just be the strong, mature, responsible child they needed you to be, so they didn't have to deal with one more thing. And you internalized that, made it a core belief, decided that your feelings were burdens and your needs were problems, and the only way to be lovable was to not have feelings or needs, to be self-sufficient, to handle everything alone. And now you're an adult who knows intellectually that emotions are normal but can't access them without shame, who knows theoretically that asking for help is healthy but feels like a failure every time you consider it. Who spent so long being the strong one that you don't know how to be anything else. Don't know who you'd be if you weren't holding everything together. Don't know if people would still want you around if you stopped being useful and started being honest. You're not strong, you're traumatized. You're not mature, you're hypervigilant. You're not independent, you're abandoned. And the sooner you understand that what everyone praised as your greatest qualities were actually survival responses to environments that should have been safer, the sooner you can start grieving what you lost. Which was childhood, which was permission to be small and scared and needy, which was the right to cry without being told you're too sensitive, to struggle without being told you're too weak, to need support without being told you're too much, and that grief, that acknowledgement of what was stolen from you. That's not self-pity. That's not weakness. That's finally being honest about what happened, about what you had to do to survive, about the cost of being strong when you should have been allowed to be soft. So here's what changes. Here's what you practice even though it feels impossible. Even though every cell in your body is screaming that it's not safe, you start letting yourself feel one emotion at a time without immediately trying to fix it or explain it or make it go away. You sit with sadness for 5 minutes without distracting yourself. You let anger exist without judging it as bad. You allow fear without pretending you're not scared. And you don't have to show these feelings to anyone yet. Don't have to be vulnerable with others before you've learned to be vulnerable with yourself. You just practice acknowledging that the feelings exist, that you're having a human experience, that emotions aren't dangerous even though you were taught they were. They're just information, just your system processing experiences. And they won't destroy you if you let them be felt, won't make you weak if you acknowledge them, won't prove you're broken if you finally admit that you're tired of being strong, tired of holding it together, tired of being the one everyone can count on when you can't remember the last time you felt like you could count on anyone, including yourself. Start asking for help with small things, ridiculously small things, things that feel stupid to need help with, and notice what happens. Notice if the world ends. Notice if people reject you. Notice if the catastrophe you've been predicting your entire life actually occurs. And when it doesn't. When people help you and the relationship survives and you're still lovable even though you had a need. Let that be evidence. Let that start rewiring the belief that needing anything makes you unworthy. And do it again. Ask for something else. Let someone see you struggling. Let someone hold space for your difficulty without you minimizing it or apologizing for it or immediately shifting focus back to them, and keep doing this. Keep practicing being human instead of being strong. Keep choosing vulnerability over performance. Keep letting people see the real you instead of the capable version you've been showing the world since you were too young to know you had a choice. You grew up too fast because you had to. Learned that crying was weakness because showing emotion made your environment more dangerous, not less. Discovered that feeling was a luxury you couldn't afford because nobody was going to help you process what you felt. So it was easier to just not feel at all. And none of that was your fault. None of that was your choice. You were a child adapting to circumstances that required you to be something other than a child. And you survived. You made it. You're here. But surviving isn't the same as living. And what you're learning now, what you're finally ready to accept, is that the strength that saved you as a child is suffocating you as an adult. That the independence that kept you safe is keeping you lonely. That the emotional control that made you manageable made you unable to connect. And it's time. It's finally time to let yourself be weak, to let yourself need, to let yourself feel everything you've been holding back since you were small and scared, and told to be strong. And the person you needed to protect you then isn't coming, but the person who can protect you now is you. The adult version who finally understands that the child inside deserved to cry, deserved to feel, deserved to be held instead of holding everyone else. And even though it's late, even though you can't get those years back, you can give that child now what they needed then. Permission to fall apart, permission to be messy, permission to be human. And the certainty that being strong isn't the only way to be worthy, that crying isn't weakness, it's healing, that feeling isn't danger, it's finally, devastatingly, necessarily being alive.